Love that music. Hi, folks. How you doing? Dana Torres, Senior Director of Security here at Sumo Logic. Today, I've got George Gerchow with me. He is our Chief Security Officer and Senior Vice President for IT at Sumo Logic. Today, we thought the timeliest of topics would be to talk about the recent ruling last week that was just handed down by the United States Security and Exchange Commission on cybersecurity incident disclosures. So, welcome, George, and let us know what what the heck's going on, man. Just break it down.
It's a great way to ask it. And by the way, my guy, it's good to see you. I think last time I saw you in person, we were both accepting awards at RSA. So good to
That's
see your
right.
handsome face.
Yep.
Look, Dana, this has been going on for almost 2 years. They released some initial thoughts, the SEC did. And then there was something like 14,000 different questions around it. People wanted to see some changes. And so it's taken a long time to get here. This was anticipated, I believe, in April of 2022 for this to come out.
Oh, wow.
No,
Okay.
April of 2023, one or the other. This is how much time has gone by. But they finally dropped. And some very significant things that we've been warning people about for a while to try to get prepared for this. And the biggest one is something that you alluded to, which is reporting an incident of material impact in 4 days. Now,
Yeah.
for any of my attorney friends on the call, they're all like, "Oh, it's just a 8K form, and you submit it in." And it's like, no, it's much more than that. It's how do you get through that process? How do you define the fact that it's a material incident? How do you do it quickly?
Yep.
And then who actually does the reporting out? Like who fills out that form? Who signs off on that form? And even more importantly, too, Dana, is like who had knowledge of that, and how do you have custody of this? Because we've seen what's happened, like in the Joe Sullivan case, and with some other companies out there where CISOs are under fire and other executives for potentially withholding information. So
Yeah.
it's going to be very, very complex for a lot of companies to be able to do this, man.
Interesting. Now, this is a level of complexity. I wrote a blog on this that you folks can check out if you'd like, where it feels like now we've taken the rigor and the pressure that folks were feeling already, before last week. Now we're just cranking it up to 11. So my guess is that there's the compliance angle of it. There's the cybersecurity risk, and there's always risk, and you're trying to bat that down. There's costs involved, this added pressure. What else do you think could be an impact to publicly traded companies? Who this is targeted at, and also if you could let the viewers know, what are you thinking about the folks that aren't publicly traded, and how does it kind of attach itself to them as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, we were a publicly traded company until recently, and so we still have some of
Sure.
this rigor. But the biggest worry is how do I condense all this down really to that 4 days? And
Yeah.
once I do file that 8K, now possibly every bad actor on the planet knows that I'm vulnerable. So I have to deal with that. Then plus, Dana, the questions. This reminds me of like back in the day when I was a security engineer and I'd be working in a traditional data center trying to fix a problem. There'd be 15 to 20 executives on the phone wanting updates while they were playing golf or having dinner with their families or whatever. And it's like that kind of distraction sucks, man, because it can cause you to have a misstep. It can cause you to all of a sudden start thinking about things that you potentially shouldn't have to think about. So overall, I see this as a really good thing because I think too many companies were not forthright and transparent in what
Yeah.
they were doing. But at the same time, man, like this is going to put a lot of pressure on the people actually working the problems and the companies who came out with this. And then now you just asked a very key question too.
Okay.
From a privately held company,
Yeah.
startup, do I worry about this? Absolutely. For a couple of reasons. The first one is, supply chain. I have to do business with public facing companies most of the time, right?
Yep.
And I'm probably going to use some tools and platforms from those companies. Do I trust them? Are they ready for this? What does their SBOM look like? And different things like that. But then also, this is just the beginning. And so I feel like this is going to be best practices, setting a standard across the board. So now we go to do business with someone that does business with a lot of public facing companies. They're going to want to ensure these same standards.
Yep. That actually makes sense because that chain of custody is just going to keep on chaining itself all the way down the field. Well,
Totally.
what have the companies? First thing that comes to my mind, I'm thinking of like, what have they gotten away with? But what have they been doing so far for like reporting a breach? I mean, there's so many mega breaches, there's mini breaches. The great folks over at Ponemon Institute have been tracking the cost of a data breach every year for like 15 years now straight, and we see the numbers keep ratcheting up, and then it dips down, but it's still 292, 252 days, doesn't matter. It's 252 days longer than it should be. So with that in mind, that's the backdrop. What have folks done lately to be able to get through this? What is the process to report a material cybersecurity incident?
Well, let's work that backwards because first off, I feel like most companies really don't have a good handle on what's material.
Uh,
So there are
yep.
regulations around it. There's things like PCI and other regulations that we've seen out there. FedRAMP has like an open vulnerability disclosure program and other things, but it's still how do I say this? In reality, whenever there's been a breach, and let's just talk about retailers for a second.
Yeah.
If there's a retailer that's breached, it gets in the news, like maybe fourth, fifth page, whatever else, and then we're right back at that retailer in a couple of weeks, man. We're like, I like to shop here. It's just happening, and so there's a fine, and that fine is usually equivalent to a slush fund, right? I can have a really nice happy hour if I wanted to with that. This could potentially, my brother, be a little bit different because
Okay.
again, like if we tie it back to what happened in the Joe Sullivan case, which is all public knowledge, I feel like people are going to be in front of the DOJ. I think that this is leading to people potentially going to jail. Uh,
Wow.
and, and, and so that's another thing that needs to be considered here is, and if you follow just that alone, you see all the finger pointing that's taking place. Joe's like, CEO knew, CEO's like, I had no idea, like all this other stuff. And plus, what makes that case even more interesting, and by
Yeah.
the way, I'm a Sullivan fan, is the fact that there was another breach happening during that breach, and that's what caused all this. How did that other breach happen? It was being held at a bounty. Well, maybe because there was some public knowledge around what was taking place. So tying
Yeah.
that back off to that, it's going to be extremely difficult for companies to figure out what that trigger point is to go from an event, something I'm investigating, to an actual incident. And I feel like they're under equipped to be able to do that.
It, under equipped. So now you're tapping into, you're picking away at the personnel challenges that
Mhm.
we've seen across security for decades now. Uh, that tells
Almost soon.
me that folks are still strapped. They are working in these economic conditions that we all are, but probably with less folks than they would have desired. Maybe they've got some good tooling. Maybe they've got too much tooling, some stuff that somebody before them bought and it's not been turned on, or it's legacy. Maybe it can't even see into the cloud infrastructure that they're trying to secure. When it comes to the materiality aspect, you're raising up another good point. Like, what is material? Like, if somebody were to like the CEO, if his or her laptop was taken or lost, you know, is it material that it was lost? Depends. I mean, what if they were still logged into like an SSO, like their Okta was still enabled? Well, the materiality probably depends on, well, what is somebody going to go do with that laptop now before it finally would time out? So you've got these like micro windows of time, or like a DDoS attack against maybe you brought up a retailer, so that's a great PCI perspective. But what about the exposure or the risk of the financial impact? If you had a DDoS outage to your critical business app for retail and you were offline, knocked offline for 5 minutes, is that material? Or does it have to be 3 days? Maybe that's material. Because now you've got some math happening. You've got some dollars that are going out the door, or I should say, dollars that weren't coming in the door potentially.
Yeah, I think it's about the data, really.
Okay.
Is the data that's being exposed, is
Yep.
it going to create a ransomware situation? Is it sensitive data that's going to affect consumers and also investors? Because this is the other thing that makes this a little bit different too. Is the investor community is going to put tremendous pressure on companies, whenever something does happen. And
Yeah.
the other odd thing that we haven't discussed that's come out of this, speaking of material, is that right now what the SEC rules are saying is we just kind of want to know that there was a breach, but not really the technical details behind the process. Well, I almost swore, Dana. It's crap, right? It really is because the first thing that's going to happen, like if I call you up, Dana, and say, hey,
Yep.
your laptop was exposed, people were able to get some of your personal data. Next question out of your mouth is how? How?
Yeah.
Did you fix it and how? And
Yeah.
so the technical details are very much going to matter. And I believe like this is where we've been so well positioned for so long as a company is
Mhm.
like our platform, our tool does this in a very quick, agile way. We get to the root cause of a problem via logging analytics, and then
Yeah.
we're able to surface that up. We're able to help people fix it quicker, and then also go back and check and make sure that you're not vulnerable anymore. So when it comes to reporting, finding these things, reporting these things, and then making sure that you're mitigating from future risk, we're really well positioned for that.
So yeah, you're you dove right into Sumo's way of helping our customers that we've been doing today, which is, it all starts with the logs. When it comes to the B word, it probably ends with logs. So you're talking dashboards, you're talking queries, you're talking about, getting to a level of a forensic analysis, in effect. But there's also other technologies too. Even with our SIM, we've got entity relationship graphs. You can actually start to understand the scope of that detected threat, and this probably helps with the materiality decision making process, uh, and time. We didn't even touch on time. It's personnel, materiality, and time. So it's been taking folks a while to coordinate their efforts, and now they're being told, "Guess what? You got 4 days." Once you've started the clock, I'm thinking in my mind, it's like a chess clock, and as soon as you're done doing your investigation and you've got that materiality determined, now the clock starts and it's 4 days. What can folks do in 4 days without Sumo with Sumo?
It's going to be so tough because of what you mentioned before too, because there's also the talent gap. Do I have
Yeah.
the right skill sets? I'm in a company that, probably has some legacy tools, but have a cloud first initiative. All of a sudden, I'm bringing in a lot of SaaS and other
Yep.
things as well. And so some companies are going to have a very difficult time with this. Like I will say this, and you were around when we had Log4j. When
Yeah, that's right.
Log4j hit, it was really good for us as a company because we figured out that we had the right tool sets, the right partners,
Yep.
because there is like not one magic silver bullet, even though logs matter, because that's always where you go first.
True.
But then also we realized that we had the skill sets and we had to fix some things when it came to comms and processes. And so that was
Yep.
a really good learning lesson for us. And I just don't know if people have been there yet, if they've done those tabletop exercises to truly understand what their architecture looks like, because it's no longer this hard shell, soft center security approach. It's
Yep.
data is everywhere, man.
Yep.
So again, I think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle to be able to condense what these teams typically do such a good job of doing, but to condense it into like that 4 day window and then what takes place. I mean, from my perspective, I'd rather run things back from a postmortem. Hey,
Yeah.
we knew that there was an incident. We got to a postmortem. Everything's fixed. We know it's better. Then I can tell you, because it's just going to add just a lot of craziness to it to do it while there's an incident. And a great example around this, I don't know if you remember or not, was the Okta breach. And I do that always in air quotes because I
Yeah.
felt like their CISO David did such a great job of being transparent. I
Yes, they
appreciated
did.
it, but
Yep.
he got crucified for that.
Yeah.
Like people were like, "You're making mistakes," and I was like, "My guy is giving us advice and giving us updates in real time," and I appreciated it, because we were using the federal instance of Okta, so we
That's
knew
right.
that we were okay. But it's going to be really hard for other companies for sure to be able to pull that off in that short amount of time.
Yeah. You're also now touching on the fact that when you have a plan in place, that plan is only as good as that first shot going off. And boy, that in all these examples that George has just cited, folks, it's absolutely right. I mean, Log4j is a great example. I mean, we had a plan in place. We knew how to communicate within a team across all the different functions. Of course, I'm over in marketing land. George is over there with the engineers for the actual service for Sumo Logic, and yeah, just up and down the court. It's a good motion to get you focused and make sure that everything's well oiled, going through that digital 3-ring binder, for response. Well, that's this is going to be interesting to find out what happens, where the SEC want to go. Any ideas of what you think the future might hold for the SEC?
Yeah, I do. I think eventually they're going to probably have to amend them again to say technical details required, and then
Yep.
possibly like what happens, after that 8K is filed.
That's
Um,
right.
did bad actors take advantage of it? Did they not? And then one thing
Yep.
that you and I are going to discuss, and we're going to probably do this again in December because that's when all this is going to become real, is why like take out the part around having to disclose cybersecurity expertise at a board level? To me, that was silly. But
Yeah.
again, I'll say that I support this. I support these kinds of changes, taking a step forward, because I do believe that too many companies kind of hung on to the fact that they were breached, and then all of a sudden, the news got out and it was just over.
Yep.
Usually through a bounty, and everyone was kind of put into a compromising position.
Yep. And another thing is the fines. The SEC ruling doesn't mention anything about
Ooh,
what could be tens of millions in fines. I'm sure that's
oh,
going to be another addendum later.
DOJ,
Yeah,
DOJ,
well,
baby.
you have to hand it over to them. Yeah. Oh my gosh. They probably have a lot of power, and things they can do in their hurt locker of penalties. So that's probably
Totally.
waiting for folks as well. Well, thank you for helping unpack it for our audience, folks. Hear more about this. In fact, George is going to be talking next week at Black Hat on Wednesday, August 9th at 2 p.m. local time, Pacific time, there at Mandalay Bay Convention Center. So I encourage, if you're there for Black Hat, check him out. I know I will be there as well with the rest of our Sumo team, wandering the halls, walking the halls, and having conversations with customers and anybody that wants to hear more about how logs can help in such a seemingly innocuous way, like, oh yeah, it's just this little SEC thing. Well, it's not, folks, and I think you've just heard from George himself. So thank you, George, for your time as always, and folks, thanks for watching.
Thanks, Adam. Always great to work with you.
Same here, buddy.